Hi, welcome to the Guitar Department. I'm your host, Joe Alton. On this episode, we're going to be talking about jazz guitar. We'll go over a few basic chord shapes that you'll need to know during a jazz guitar session. We'll talk about some basic ways to use that chord, a little basic information that you'll need to use those chords. We've got a special lick of the week, and in our Tone Zone segment, we're going to talk about the difference between overdrive, distortion, and fuzz. Welcome to the Guitar Department. So today we're going to talk about three different types of chords: major 7 chords, dominant 7 chords, and minor 7 chords. And we're going to cover two different ways to play each of those chord progressions. To start with, we've got the major 7 chord. Right now I'm playing it in the key of E. So I've got my middle finger on the root of the chord, which is the note E. It's on the 7th fret of the A string. Just below that, I've got my first finger on the 3rd of the chord, which is a G sharp. And then we've got my ring finger on the 7th of the chord, which is a D sharp. Those three notes make up the major 7 chord. Now, some of you, right off the top, might be asking, why not play a more full bar chord shape like this, which is also an E major 7 chord? And the reason is that in jazz comping, a lot of times they want you to lay back a little more, not play quite so full, especially if somebody's playing lead over top of what you're playing, or if you have another comping instrument like a piano playing along with you. You sort of want to stay back and keep the rhythm a little bit more. So we're going to stick to our 3-note voicings for now. So here is our major 7, middle finger on 7, pointer finger on 6, and then I've got my ring finger, in this case, on 8. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to turn this shape into a dominant 7 shape. Now, the difference in terms of how you would see it on the page is that a dominant 7 would just be written as E7 instead of E major 7, which would give us the chord that we're using here. So for E7, I'm going to move my ring finger back 1 fret. I'm going to flatten the 7th. So we've got the same root, the same 3rd, the G sharp, and our D sharp has now turned into a regular D. And that gives us an E7 chord. And then to make that chord minor 7, which would be written as an E and then a small m and then the number 7, or possibly in jazz parlance you might see E and then a minus sign, like the mathematical symbol for minus. And what I'm going to do is take my pointer finger, I'm going to move it back 1 fret. So now I've got 7 on the pointer, or 7 on the middle finger, excuse me. The pointer finger on 5, on a regular G, a G natural, and then my ring finger stays put on that D natural. Just like that. So we've got our 3 types of shapes laid out right there: major 7, dominant 7, and minor 7. Now, of course, jazz has all kinds of different chords in it, but those 3 shapes will help you get through most of the jazz songs that you might encounter in a combo session. But we're going to learn a second way to play all of them, too. Because these chords, the 3 I just showed you, all have the root on the 5th string, which means that the lowest note of the chord, the letter name of the chord, is somewhere on the 5th string. You can move it to wherever you need it. If it's here, it's E major 7. If I lower it by 2 frets, it's a D major 7. 2 more frets, it's a C major 7. Same movement, just parallel. But if we want to play these chords in a fluid way, we want to be able to play them on either string. And in fact, you want to learn as many different voicings as you can. But for the sake of not confusing everything, I'm going to just move it up a string, and we're going to talk about how to put the root on the 6th string. So, in this case, I'm going to play them in the key of B, because that is also on the 7th fret. The top string, 7th fret, is a B. So there's our root of the chord. And then for the major 7 version of the chord, we're going to skip over the 5th string and jump down to the 4th string and play the 8th fret with the middle finger. And then I'm going to put my ring finger on the 8th fret of the 3rd string. So right here I've got my root, which is the B, and then I've got my major 7, which would be an A sharp, and then I've got my major 3rd below that. So root, 7, 3. You can tell it's a little inverted from what we had before where it was root, 3, 7. So root, 7, 3, and that gives us our major 7 chord. And to make that chord dominant, I'm going to move my middle finger back 1 fret. So it'll be 7th fret, and then ring finger on 8th fret. Just like that. Musically speaking, I turn the A sharp into an A natural. And then to make it a B minor, we're going to do the same thing with the D sharp. We're going to take it back 1 fret and have all of the notes on the 7th fret. So again, we've got the same 3 chords, the major 7, dominant 7, and minor 7. Now, this is a great way to lay out how a minor 7 chord is played. But when I play it in the jazz sessions that I've been in, I usually play it a little differently. I use my middle finger on the top string on the B and flatten out 1 finger across both of the 7s on the 3rd and 4th string. And the reason for that is that it makes it a little easier to change to a string or to a chord that's on the next string down. So that's another option for you too. You can use 2 fingers, you can use 1, 2, and 3 if you'd like, or you can use your middle finger and your ring finger spread out across 2 or 3 of those strings. If you flatten out all the way down to the B string, you end up with the 5th of the chord as well. So that's kind of a handy trick also. So those are the 3 shapes that we're going to work with: the major 7, minor 7, and dominant 7. And then on the 5th string, the same thing: major 7, dominant 7, and minor 7. So next we're going to talk a little bit about some comping rhythms, and the most obvious place to start, most jazz guitar players will tell you, is with the Freddie Green style. Now, Freddie Green sort of championed this style, and it's really great for learning how to comp in jazz. All you do is you take your progression. Now, the chord progression I'm going to use here is B minor to E7, down to A7, and then we're going to land on the D major 7. This is called a 6-2-5-1 in the key of D minor, or D major, excuse me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give each one of them 1 measure in 4/4 time, 4 beats each, and I'm going to strum with my thumb downward like that, and as I get through the chord, I'm going to release the pressure with the left hand so that the chord sort of stops. That's a really common way to comp under jazz songs. And you can do it at any speed. The faster it goes, the more sort of hoppy the rhythm gets. And it's something that will translate into other styles if you end up playing things other than jazz, being able to press down a chord when you want it to ring and then let go, but keep your fingers on the string so that you don't get a pull off to the open string. like that. You want to keep the strings deadened when you want the chord to not be playing, like that. And then you squeeze again right when you're ready to strum. And that's how you comp in the Freddie Green style. One of the other jazz greats that you'll come across as you start to learn more and more about jazz guitar is Wes Montgomery. He's sort of the biggest name in jazz guitar, and part of his style also included playing with the thumb by himself. He sort of developed his own technique in the lieu of formal training. He didn't really have a whole lot of formal training. And so to demonstrate that, we've got our producer, Bryce Jarrett, is going to show us a little bit about that with the song Round Midnight. And now it's time for our lick of the week, and this week I've chosen what's known as the lick. And if you're not familiar with the lick, I suggest you go to YouTube and just look up the phrase "the lick." What you'll find is a compilation video of many jazz players, and in fact a lot of players from various styles, using this exact scale movement in their jazz improvs. And it's so common that it has its own Wikipedia page. Without further ado, here is the lick. And so what I did there, this is going to be in the key of D minor. And I started on the 7th fret, which is the 5th of the scale. I'm starting from there and jumping straight down to the root of the scale. And then from there we just walk up, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and then slide back into the 2nd, down to the minor 7, and then back to the root. So part of the reason that lick is so common is that it's a wonderful way to outline the root of the chord. So our root in this case is D. And we're really just, once we hit that D, we're just playing the D minor scale straight up, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. That in itself doesn't have a whole lot of tension other than we've landed on the 4th of the scale, which is what they call a non-chord tone. And that means that it has a dissonance, a bit of tension to it. So we run all the way up from the root to the 4th, and then we jump back to the 2nd of the scale, or the 9th in jazz parlance is used a lot of times. So we've got the 4th, and then the 9th, which is also a non-chord tone, and then we jump down to the 7, which is actually, so the 2nd of the scale, the 9th, and the 7th, in terms of the scale itself, they surround the root. So we've got, the root is the 8th note of the scale. In this case, we're an octave up from where the chord would be played. So doing that, having the 9th down to the 7th, and then to the root, creates a nice little bit of tension. 4, 2, 7, and then the root of the scale. And that's what brings about the resolution of the tension. We have this little run up, and then the journey back down takes us to the 2nd, up to the 7th, and then to the root. Now it's time for us to enter the tone zone, and this week on the tone zone we're going to talk about the difference between overdrive, distortion, and fuzz. Those three terms get thrown out quite a bit, and very rarely do you hear discussed what the difference between the three of them is. So we're going to start with overdrive. Excuse me. So my clean signal sounds like this, or to play a chord. Now, we have this amp, this beautiful Fender Tone Master, turned down relatively low. It's on about 3 or 4. But if I turned it up all the way to 10 and really maxed out the speaker and the amp that's inside of it, we would start to hear a little bit of breakup. You would start to hear a little bit of crack when I really dug into the notes. And that's essentially what overdrive is. We have a signal processor that is designed to copy that clipping of the amp inside. And so I'm going to start with my TS9 here, the Ibanez TS9 Tube Screamer. And so here's an example of overdrive. And so it's kind of a low gain, meaning that there isn't a whole lot of fuzz or breakup, just enough to give us a little bit of snarl when we really dig in. And that's one of the main features of overdrive, is that it responds to your dynamics. If you play softly, you don't hear it quite as much, but if you dig in, you start to hear a little bit more of that breakup. Next, we're going to talk about the distortion. So this is our DS1. Right away you can hear there's a lot more breakup going on in there. And this is kind of a different version of the same idea. We've added some gain, meaning that we've got some processing of the signal going on. But distortion pedals take your original tone and they mess with it in whatever way they're specifically designed to. So no matter how softly you play, you still hear that same breakup. Obviously the volume goes up when you play louder, but you don't necessarily get more of the distortion, at least not as significantly as you do with an overdrive pedal. Next, we're going to talk about fuzz. Fuzz is kind of a different animal. It's the same concept, we're just adding gain to the signal that we already have, but with fuzz, they have what's called a square wave compression. And I had to look up what that meant, to be honest. But what it means is that the gain itself spikes the signal, and then the compression takes the volume, their dynamics, and lowers it so that it squeezes those peaks and makes them just straight across. And the point of that, the effect of that, is to actually make it sound like your amp is broken in a controlled way. Now that's sort of a classic fuzz sound there. It's very, you think about American Woman. Lots of songs that just use that old school fuzz tone. This specific pedal, the Behringer Super Fuzz, has 3 different settings though. And so we're on Fuzz 1, which is a classic fuzz. If I switch that to Fuzz 2, you can hear there's a lot more gain involved there. And especially if you play a chord. It almost sounds like you've ripped a speaker or you've blown a tube. And it's a really useful sound when you're playing metal specifically. There's one more thing about this pedal that I like a lot. It also has a boost setting, which is just a clean boost. It just takes your signal and makes it louder. And I can demonstrate that as well here. So again, this is going to be the clean signal. If I turn it off, here's what it sounds like without the boost. And then to flip it back on, it's a nice little clean boost. You can put it at the beginning of your chain and it just amplifies everything a little bit more. You would use the boost if you were going to do a solo and you wanted it to pop a little bit more than the rhythm parts that you had been playing. You just click that boost on and it'll make everything just a little bit louder for you. But that's not the feature that I was going to point out. We have Fuzz 1, we have Fuzz 2, and then below that we have boost. But on these pedals, the Behringer Super Fuzz, there is a bit of a hidden setting. Or between Fuzz 1 and Fuzz 2, if you lodge that switch just between the two of them just right, you get sort of a secret setting, a third fuzz that enables both Fuzz 1 and Fuzz 2. And as one of the cheaper pedals on the market right now, you can see why the Super Fuzz is blowing up everywhere. But that's our pedal of the week, the Super Fuzz Behringer SF300. Thank you for joining us on the Guitar Department. I've been your host, Joe Alton. I want to thank Riemann Music for giving us a place to shoot this show, for loaning me this beautiful Ibanez Artcore hollow body. I almost said semi-hollow. It's a fully hollow body to demonstrate the jazz show, as well as the Tone Master and the Ibanez TS9. I want to thank our producer, Bryce, and our camera person, Jason. And be sure to join us on Facebook at facebook.com/theguitardepartment. And we'll see you next time right here on the Guitar Department.